The moment Eliza Montgomery leaned in close, her crimson dress catching the light of 1,000 twinkling Christmas decorations, and whispered those words in James Parker's ear, he knew his life would never be the same. What he couldn't possibly know was that by morning, one of them would be missing, leaving behind nothing but a single glass slipper and questions that would shake their small town to its core. James stood awkwardly by the punch bowl, checking his watch for the 15th time. 9:47 p.m. His date was officially an hour and 47 minutes late to the company Christmas Eve party. The babysitter was charging double for holiday hours, and he'd spent a week's grocery money on a new shirt that his 7-year-old daughter Emma had helped him pick out. "This one makes your eyes look like the ocean, Daddy," she had said, holding up the deep blue button-down against his chest in the department store. Now he was standing alone, nursing his third cup of non-alcoholic eggnog, watching his co-workers dance and laugh with their partners. His phone buzzed with a text, "Sorry, not going to make it." Something came up. "Merry Christmas though." No explanation. No real apology. Just another reminder that dating as a single father was an exercise in disappointment. "You've been staring at that phone like it might transform into something more interesting," came a familiar voice from behind him. Spoiler alert, it won't. James turned to find Eliza Montgomery, his boss, the formidable CEO of Montgomery Publishing, standing before him in a dress the color of mulled wine. Her long, silky blonde hair cascaded over her shoulders, and the fitted dress accentuated her perfect figure in ways that made James immediately avert his eyes. Office politics were complicated enough without being caught staring at the woman who signed his paychecks. A mess. "Montgomery," he nodded, trying to maintain professionalism despite the Christmas lights reflecting in her eyes making them sparkle like champagne. "Just checking in on the babysitter." "Liar," she said with a knowing smile. "And it's Eliza tonight." "We're at a party, James, not a board meeting." Before he could respond, her expression changed. The confident CEO suddenly looked nervous. She glanced over her shoulder at the entrance where a distinguished older man in an expensive suit had just walked in, flanked by what appeared to be business associates. That's when she leaned in close, her perfume, something expensive and intoxicating, clouding his senses as she whispered, "I need a fake husband for 2 hours. Please say yes." James blinked, certain he'd misheard. "I'm sorry, what?" "That man who just walked in is Richard Harrington. He's about to become our biggest investor, and he's also my ex-fiancée's father. He thinks I'm married now because I may have exaggerated certain aspects of my life to make him believe I've moved on completely." Her words came out in a rushed whisper. "Please, James. I've seen how you are with your daughter. You're the only one here I trust to pull this off." James should have said no. He had a strict policy against office entanglements. He had a daughter to think about. He had a heart that had been broken too many times to count. Instead, he found himself asking, "What's our story?" The relief in Eliza's eyes was immediate and profound. "Married 2 years. Met through work. Madly in love. Follow my lead on the details." She slipped a gold band onto his finger, where had she been keeping that, and threaded her arm through his. "Ready, husband?" What James couldn't possibly know as he nodded and straightened his shoulders was that by agreeing to this charade, he was stepping into a web of family secrets, corporate intrigue, and unexpected danger that would culminate in a Christmas morning revelation that would leave the entire company in shock. The next 2 hours were a masterclass in improvisation. James found himself channeling a confidence he hadn't felt since before his divorce 3 years ago. He kept his hand at the small of Eliza's back, laughed at the right moments, and somehow managed to convince Richard Harrington and his associates that he was madly in love with the woman who usually terrified the entire marketing department. "And how did you propose?" asked Richard's wife, a woman dripping in diamonds who seemed determined to catch them in a lie. James felt Eliza tense beside him, but he simply smiled and said, "I took her to the children's bookstore where we first met." I had the owner help me create a custom fairy tale, our story, and on the last page, instead of the end, it said, "Will you marry me?" He glanced at Eliza, whose wide eyes suggested she was impressed with his quick thinking. She cried. I'd never seen her cry before. I did not cry, Eliza protested automatically, then caught herself. Well, maybe a little. A lot, James insisted with a teasing smile. Mascara everywhere. The easy banter between them felt surprisingly natural. James found himself enjoying the way Eliza's professional mask slipped occasionally, revealing glimpses of someone warmer and more vulnerable than the Ice Queen who ran their Monday morning meetings with military precision. And children? Richard asked, his gaze sharp and assessing. My daughter, Emma, James answered truthfully. She's 7 going on 30. She calls me Liza, Eliza added, surprising James. She's decided that stepmom sounds too much like a fairy tale villain. James stared at her, wondering how she knew that was exactly what Emma would say. His daughter had strong opinions about fairy tales and their problematic portrayal of blended families. As the night progressed, James found himself forgetting they were pretending. When Eliza laughed at his jokes, it felt genuine. When she rested her head against his shoulder during a slow dance, he caught himself wishing the song wouldn't end. You're surprisingly good at this, she murmured against his ear as they swayed to Have Yourself a Merry Little Christmas. At dancing? At being someone's partner. Her voice had lost its usual sharp edge. Emma's mother is a fool for leaving. The comment caught him off guard. He'd never discussed his ex-wife at work, but somehow Eliza knew. How did you? I pay attention, James. More than you think. The moment was interrupted when Richard approached them, now visibly intoxicated and wearing a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Eliza, might I borrow you for a moment? Business never sleeps, even on Christmas Eve. James felt a flicker of unease as Eliza squeezed his hand and followed Richard toward a quiet corner of the venue. Something in the older man's demeanor had shifted, becoming almost predatory. James watched them, noticing how Eliza's posture had stiffened, how her smile had become fixed and professional again. He was about to follow when his phone rang, the babysitter. Emma had woken up with a nightmare and was asking for him. By the time he finished reassuring his daughter that yes, Santa would still come even if she accidentally fell asleep before putting out cookies, Eliza and Richard had disappeared. James searched the party, an inexplicable sense of urgency building in his chest. He finally spotted them on the balcony, their conversation appearing heated despite their forced smiles. As he approached, he caught fragments. Never intended for you to actually find someone. Not your concern anymore, Richard. Still have the power to destroy everything you've built. James pushed open the balcony door just as Richard grabbed Eliza's wrist. Everything okay out here? He asked, his voice deliberately casual even as he moved to Eliza's side. The tension crackled between the three of them, a dangerous electricity that had nothing to do with Christmas lights and everything to do with power, control, and secrets James was only beginning to glimpse. Your wife was just explaining how you two met, Richard said smoothly, releasing Eliza's wrist. Fascinating story. Almost too perfect, wouldn't you say? The best things often seem too good to be true, James replied, slipping his arm around Eliza's waist. We should rejoin the party. I believe they're about to announce the winner of the ugly sweater contest. As they turned to leave, Richard called after them, Eliza, remember what I said. Some ghosts don't stay buried, no matter how pretty the gravestone. Back inside, Eliza's composure cracked. I need air, real air, not whatever that was. She grabbed her coat and headed for the side exit, James following close behind. In the empty parking lot, snowflakes drifted lazily around them, catching in Eliza's hair like a crown of stars. She paced, her breath forming clouds in the cold December air. Want to tell me what that was about? James asked gently. Not particularly. She stopped pacing and looked at him, really looked at him, as if seeing him for the first time. Why did you agree to this tonight? You could have said no. James considered lying, considered some glib answer about team spirit or professional courtesy. Instead, he found himself telling the truth. Because you looked scared. And I know what that feels like, to be cornered, to need someone in your corner. Something in her expression softened. The bookstore proposal story, that was lovely. It's what I would have done. If it had been real. The words hung between them, heavy with implication. Eliza took a step toward him, snow crunching beneath her heels. James, there's something you should know about Richard, about why I needed this charade tonight. The side door burst open, spilling light and Christmas music into the parking lot. One of the accounting interns stumbled out, clearly searching for them. Ms. Montgomery. There you are. Mr. Harrington is looking for you, something about finalizing details before he leaves. Eliza's professional mask slid back into place so quickly James almost got whiplash. Of course. We'll be right in. Before they could return to the party, she turned to James and whispered urgently, meet me at Holloway Bridge at midnight. I'll explain everything. She pressed a small, hard object into his palm, a USB drive. If I don't show up, give this to Detective Sarah Chen. Only her. Eliza, what? Trust me, James. Please. With that cryptic exchange, they returned to the party. For the next hour, James watched as Eliza charmed investors, laughed at the right moments, and played the perfect CEO. No one would have guessed that she had just handed him what felt distinctly like insurance against something, or someone. At 11:45, Eliza caught his eye across the room and gave him an almost imperceptible nod before slipping out a side door. James waited 5 minutes before making his own exit, the USB drive burning a hole in his pocket and questions burning in his mind. The drive to Holloway Bridge took exactly 12 minutes. As James pulled up, snow was falling more heavily, blanketing the world in silence. The old stone bridge, decorated with Christmas lights for the holiday season, arched over the frozen river like something from a Victorian postcard. But Eliza wasn't there. James waited, checking his watch as midnight came and went. He tried calling her cell phone, straight to voicemail. By 12:30, worry had settled into his stomach like a stone. That's when he saw it, a flash of red fabric caught on the bridge railing, fluttering in the winter wind. He approached slowly, dread building with each step. There, caught on the rough stone, was a scrap of crimson fabric that matched Eliza's dress perfectly. And beside it, as if placed there deliberately, was a single red high-heeled shoe. James stared at the shoe, at the swirling snow, at the dark water below the bridge. The USB drive felt suddenly heavier in his pocket. Whatever game Eliza had been playing, whatever secrets she had been keeping, they had just become his responsibility. As the church bells rang 1 o'clock on Christmas morning, James Parker made a promise to the night: he would find Eliza Montgomery. Not because she was his boss, not because of their pretend marriage, but because for those few hours tonight, something real had sparked between them, something worth fighting for. What he didn't know was that Eliza Montgomery was fighting her own battle, one that had begun long before she'd whispered in his ear about needing a fake husband. And by Christmas night, the truth would change everything he thought he knew about the woman in red. The next morning, as Emma tore into her presence with the unbridled joy only a 7-year-old at Christmas can muster, James's phone rang. The caller ID showed a number he didn't recognize. Mr. Parker? The voice was female, professional. This is Detective Sarah Chen. I understand you might have something for me. James looked at his daughter, at the Christmas tree, at the life he'd carefully rebuilt after it had shattered 3 years ago. Then he thought of Eliza's eyes when she'd asked him to trust her. Yes, he said, watching the snow fall outside his window. I think I do. 3 hours later, James sat across from Detective Chen in a nearly empty police station, the USB drive now in her possession. Emma was with his parents, believing her father had a grown-up errand to run. The detective's face remained impassive as she reviewed the contents on her secure computer. "Mr. Parker," she finally said, removing her glasses and rubbing the bridge of her nose, "do you have any idea what you've just handed me?" "Honestly? No. Eliza, Ms. Montgomery, just asked me to trust her." Detective Chen studied him with eyes that had seen too much deception to take anything at face value. "This contains evidence of a decade-long embezzlement scheme orchestrated by Richard Harrington. Money laundering, tax evasion, even blackmail. He's been using Montgomery Publishing as a front for years, threatening to tank the company if Eliza didn't cooperate." James felt the floor shift beneath him. That's why she needed the fake husband charade. To convince him she had support, that she wasn't alone and vulnerable. Possibly. The detective tapped her pen against the desk. "But there's more. According to these files, Eliza has been gathering evidence against Harrington for years, working with us undercover. Last night was supposed to be the final piece, getting him to incriminate himself on a recording device she was wearing." "Then where is she now?" James asked, dread pooling in his stomach. Before Detective Chen could answer, her phone rang. The conversation was brief, her expression shifting from concern to relief. They found her car abandoned near the old paper mill. Signs of a struggle, but also, she paused, looking at James with newfound respect, signs that she fought back. Hard. James was on his feet instantly. "I'm coming with you. This isn't a negotiation, Mr. Parker. This is a police matter." "She trusted me," James said simply. When she could have trusted anyone else at that party, people she's known for years, she chose me. "I'm not letting her down now." Something in his voice must have convinced the detective. "You stay in the car. That's non-negotiable." The old paper mill stood like a ghost on the edge of town, a relic from when their small community had been a thriving industrial center. Snow had covered most tracks, but police were already combing the area when James and Detective Chen arrived. James waited in the car as instructed, watching the flashing lights reflect off the snow, creating an eerie blue and red Christmas light display. His mind raced with possibilities, each worse than the last. He thought of Emma, of how he'd explained to her why the woman from the Christmas party, the one he'd told her about over breakfast, might never come to meet her as he'd promised. A commotion near the building's entrance caught his attention. Officers were rushing inside, radios crackling with urgent voices. Unable to contain himself any longer, James got out of the car, the cold air biting at his face as he approached the building. That's when he saw her. Eliza Montgomery emerged from the mill, a blanket wrapped around her shoulders, her blonde hair tangled, a cut above her eyebrow, but very much alive. She was speaking rapidly to Detective Chen, gesturing toward the building with emphatic movements that suggested her fighting spirit remained unbroken. When she spotted James, she froze mid-sentence. For a moment, they simply stared at each other across the snow-covered parking lot, the chaos of police activity fading into background noise. Then Eliza broke away from the detective and walked toward him with purpose, her eyes never leaving his. When she reached him, she didn't speak immediately. Instead, she studied his face as if memorizing every detail. "You came," she finally said, her voice hoarse. "Of course I came." The words felt inadequate, but they were all he had. "I didn't give you much reason to trust me." James smiled slightly. "You gave me 2 hours of being the luckiest man at that party. Seemed fair to return the favor." Behind them, officers led Richard Harrington out in handcuffs, his expensive suit now rumpled, his dignified facade shattered. He glared at Eliza with undisguised hatred as he was guided toward a waiting police car. "He followed me from the bridge," Eliza explained quietly, watching her former tormentor being taken away. "I knew he might." That's why I left the shoe and fabric. I wanted someone to find evidence if. She didn't finish the sentence. I didn't expect it to be you who came looking. What happened here? James asked, noticing how she winced slightly when she shifted her weight. He wanted the evidence I've been collecting. When I refused to hand it over, things got physical. A ghost of a smile touched her lips. He didn't expect me to fight back. 5 years of kickboxing classes came in handy, but he still managed to get my phone and car keys before I barricaded myself in the old manager's office and used the emergency line. Detective Chen approached them, her expression professional but with a hint of admiration. Ms. Montgomery, we'll need your formal statement, but it can wait until tomorrow. You should get checked out at the hospital first. Eliza nodded, then turned back to James. Emma, your daughter, she's waiting for you on Christmas morning. You should go to her. James hesitated, torn between responsibility and the inexplicable pull he felt toward this woman he was only beginning to truly know. Come with me, he said suddenly. After the hospital. Emma's been asking about the pretty lady in the red dress since I got home last night. We're having Christmas dinner at 3. Nothing fancy, just turkey sandwiches and too many cookies. Eliza looked genuinely startled. James, you don't have to. I know I don't have to. I want to. He took a chance and reached for her hand. No pretending this time. Just Christmas with people who care about you. The vulnerability that flashed across her face made her more beautiful to him than any perfect corporate mask ever could. Turkey sandwiches sound perfect, she whispered. What James Parker couldn't possibly know as he agreed to meet Detective Chen was that his decision would set in motion events that would expose decades of corruption, reunite long-lost family members, and ultimately lead him back to the woman in red. Though not before both their lives would be irrevocably changed by the secrets hidden on that small USB drive. As for Eliza Montgomery, she was closer than anyone realized, fighting not just for her company, but for a chance at the kind of love she'd convinced herself she didn't deserve, the kind that James Parker had shown her was possible during 2 hours of pretending that had somehow become the most real thing in her life. And it all began with those 9 words whispered at a Christmas Eve party. I need a fake husband for 2 hours. Please say yes. If you enjoyed this story, please like and subscribe to see more content like this. I'd love to know what country you're watching from. Drop it in the comments below.